Welcome everyone to the second PAVE virtual panel. This week we are discussing a very big, very broad topic. The topic is, what impact will AVs have on our transportation system? And this is, as I said, a huge question with lots of answers. We could easily spend 30 hours discussing this. And in fact, we'll probably spend the next 30 years discussing this question. But since we only have 30 minutes today, I've asked our guests to not only share their expert insights into sort of their answers to this question, but also hopefully help you understand how they reason about this question, because I think it's something that we all need to do for ourselves to some extent. And so hopefully you come away with this from this session, not only with some answers that help you see a little bit of the future impact of AVs on our transportation system, but again, also some of those analytical tools that will help you then reason about what that future might look like. My guests are an incredible group of experts in this space. We'll start with Jamie Boone. She is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Consumer Technology Association and leads policy on vehicle technology. The CTA is North America's largest technology trade association. You may know it from a little show called CES, which I always look forward to every year. We're also joined from Toyota by Jade Hill. Jade is a senior engineer working on Safety Regulatory Affairs Department. She's responsible for federal and state regulations as they apply to crash avoidance and advanced technologies, including autonomous vehicles, mobility, and more. Finally, we have Bill Combs. He leads connected vehicle strategies and emerging tech experimentation for Penske Transportation Solutions. Penske operates a fleet of over 300,000 commercial vehicles, one of the largest trucking fleets in the world. So as you can see, we have a diverse group of perspectives here today. And first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to be here and share your insights with our viewers. As I said, we have a very diverse group here, and I really want to make the most of that. And so let's start with sort of going through each of you, and Jamie, we'll start with you. You know, we really have been trying to use the term autonomous vehicle a lot because I think it might help explain, you know, cast a little bit more light on sort of the variety of impacts that this technology is going to have on our transportation system compared to like a term like self-driving car. Can you sort of speak to that diversity issue?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so there's a huge ecosystem that really plays in the autonomy space. So I think when we talk about autonomous, we're talking about a lot of different levels. From, you know, some of the more, you know, driver assist can turn on and off type, you know, systems and vehicles, the whole way up to something that can drive by itself, you know, either in a certain geofence location or eventually fully 100% self-driving, no driver needed, you know, no human driver needed. So it's really a spectrum. And I think that helps people to think about, you know, as we move through time and as the technology changes and gets better and we continue to work towards higher levels of autonomy, that helps encompass all of those different types of technology into one broad sphere of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and Jade, you know, you work for a large car company. You know, does Toyota think about autonomy as being something that is a technology for cars, or is this something that maybe is taking Toyota's sort of long-term vision beyond sort of the core car business of today?
Yeah, no, definitely. So we are shifting, and you've probably heard this a lot, but we're shifting to becoming a mobility company. And this is mobility in different senses, not just moving a person from one place to another. It's moving goods, people, helping with indoor mobility. We've gone into indoor robotics and experimented with that, and we have an R&D group working on that specifically. So just, you know, to expand on what Jamie was said, there's a whole spectrum, you know, from low level autonomy in vehicles to high levels of autonomy in vehicles. The way we move people and goods could be shifting in the future. We have to kind of wrap our heads around a new way of doing business in e-commerce and things like that. And also giving people who haven't had the freedom and to move around as easily as they wanted to, try to give those opportunities and bring those opportunities to life for them.
Yeah. Bill, Jade just mentioned trucking and logistics, and it seems like, sort of in the early years of the public getting really excited about autonomous vehicles, a lot of the focus was on things like robo-taxis, very specific applications, and it seems like trucking and logistics is kind of becoming more of a focus for obviously for Penske, that's what you do, but for a lot of companies in the AV space. Why is that sort of coming? Why is trucking and logistics really coming to the forefront?
Well, I think it's a very different use case. Obviously, it's moving freight as opposed to people, and I think that the types of roadways that commercial vehicles travel on can be very different than a rideshare type example, where long haul trucking, although there isn't quite as much long haul trucking as there once was. There's a lot more hub and spoke type networks out there, but there still is a need for cross country type long haul trucks to move freight. And one of the things that anything you can do to create efficiency, a commercial truck is a tool to get products from one place to another, but all the costs inherent in that transportation are built into those products. So if you can do things to make movement of freight more efficient, such as moving a truck for 24 hours straight as opposed to 8-hour segments or 12-hour segments with a person driving, there are going to be use cases that just seem to make a lot of sense. Not to mention those interstates are, there's less from a pedestrian and cyclists and that type of, traffic light perspective as well. So you've got longer, kind of cleaner lines that'll be driven with autonomy.
Yeah, so you mentioned two sort of factors that go into this, and one is sort of, I think, what is referred to as a domain, right, which is sort of where will an autonomous vehicle operate, and then also sort of the business opportunity. Jade, could you maybe just sort of talk about the domain piece of that? What is a domain, and why does it matter to pick sort of the operating environment carefully in these early stages of autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, sure. So the domain is the environment and infrastructure that a vehicle can operate in. So the common term used within the industry is operational design domain. So that means what kind of conditions can this system handle? And that could be weather related, it could be physical infrastructure, it could be digital infrastructure. So all of these are important in the capabilities of the vehicle. So the more variables you start bringing into the picture that the vehicle and the sensors and the software has to manage all this information, the harder it is. So like Bill was saying, and like I think what you're alluding to, on highways, you don't have pedestrians. These are really complicated variables to deal with. And so several believe that it is easier to tackle the highway domain versus inner city, where you're dealing with a lot of pedestrians, a lot of unknowns and surprises.
Yeah. And Jamie, I mean, this domain, talk about the relationship between that and sort of the maturity of technology, because, I think when people say, when will autonomous vehicles be here? I think they're thinking about that in terms of cars, where they're just everywhere and they're totally ubiquitous. So, talk about that relationship between the maturing technology and and the domains.
Sure. Yeah. This is something that over the past 6 or so years of CES, we've seen really this evolution of how our members and how companies that are exhibiting at the show are thinking about autonomy and thinking about mobility. And, the first couple of years of the show, you saw a couple really heavily focused just on passenger vehicles and some of these, visions for passenger vehicles. And over the past couple of years, that's really evolved to more of what I think, Jade was saying of this vision of mobility. And companies aren't just car companies or truck companies or, scooter companies. They're thinking about mobility in a broader sense and how these different pieces will play together. So, every year at CES, every company has, a vision of how they see these things, long-term playing out. no one's going to be 100% right on exactly what that's going to look like. But the point of that exercise really is to say, here's the vision, here's what can be, here's what the future can hold. And then the show really is, a place for those companies to have those conversations about how they work together, how they get there. So over the past couple of years, we've really seen that evolution in the technologies that companies are showing. And then in the technologies that we're really starting to see companies put on the roads or do testing. And, everyone's doing something a little different. Some companies are focused more on the driver assist piece and how these technologies can help with safety. Others are going, right to the higher levels of automation, things that will work really more in, a closed loop or closed course campus setting, to, full on level 5, no restrictions autonomy, which I think everyone would probably agree is a good bit further down the road. And no one knows exactly, when that will be or, what the steps will be. I don't think that it's clear. I don't think there will be one set of steps to get there that will have level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. It's really going to be an evolution of kind of these different visions and these different priorities from different innovators coming together to create this ecosystem of things that will need to work together.
Yeah. So if the state of maturity of the technology sort of defines what domain is going to be more appropriate in the short term. That's one of the sort of factors. The other one, of course, as Bill, you mentioned, is just the business opportunity. Is the business opportunity there? Do you think, Bill, we're at a point, at least in the logistics space, where we're sort of getting beyond the limitations of domain? In other words, where we're only trying to, do deployments and testing where it's easy, and starting to get into areas where there is more of a business case, or are we still in a transition? What's the relationship there between testing the technology in a relatively limited domain versus being able to go and actually seek out where the most profitable opportunities are?
I think we're still in a heavy testing phase for certainly on the truck side, but there is freight being moved. Sure, maybe there's a human sitting behind the wheel, but the truck is doing a lot of the work and driving itself. But these are confined areas. There's a lot of activity in the Southwest, as we all know. It's a good place to start, and weather starts to become a question of, is bad weather that's not as likely in the Southwest U.S. Going to get in the way as much as it might in the Midwest, Northeast with snow and a lot of rain and different types of weather patterns? Could that create some sort of, I guess, different trajectory as far as the evolution of how this goes? But there are companies focused on AV trucking, and they're doing some really good testing. There's also, I think every fleet out there, and we are in a position to be basically an enabler to fleets. So most of what we do is not putting a driver in a truck and moving freight. It's enabling a fleet with the vehicle, the maintenance for the vehicle, whether it's a short-term rental or a longer-term lease, or just doing maintenance on vehicles. And what we see is a lot of our customers looking at where is this going to be applicable, and where are kind of the early test areas going to be, and where does it kind of make sense, knowing what we know now about the trucking as a domain, really. But, trucking and commercial movement of freight has changed a lot in the last handful of years with e-commerce as well. So the domain changes, and I think you start to look at potentially different use cases for that last mile all the way up to the cross-country long-haul trucking move.
Absolutely.
Ed, can I just add on to that? Just wanted to add on to a point that Bill made about testing and some of the considerations of where, the weather impacts could be different. I think a key point of that in some of these, different domains and where we're going to start seeing these vehicles is also what the policies are in different parts of the country and different states. Bill mentioned the South, a lot of testing going on in the Southwest, favorable weather, of course, but also, a favorable regulatory scheme. Arizona, Texas, California, a lot of testing going on in those areas because they've been, really, in the forefront of making sure that companies know what's expected of them, that they are able to test, that they're open, that they're adapting their roles for testing and for deployment. Florida is another one. So you're going to have some of these different pockets across the country that are going to see more of this, testing and deployment, depending on what those policies are.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Jade, I want to ask you about actually a specific vehicle, the Toyota EPalette, just because I think it really plays into this like the kind of unexpected diversity that you get in this space. Because I think at first it was all robo-taxis, and then I think people cottoned on to trucking and logistics and last mile delivery and things like that. But the EPalette, and I'll ask you to describe it, but my understanding, it's a store on wheels, an autonomous store on wheels, and that just strikes me as such a creative, interesting thing. Maybe if you can talk about maybe the domain, but also sort of the business sort of thinking behind that concept.
Yeah, so I kind of want to build on what Jamie and Bill had said previously and go into that. So we're seeing different, like Jamie said, different pockets of testing and different domains of testing. And so that's just kind of highlights that there are so many different issues that we're trying to tackle at the same time. So it's not like all of the testers are all testing in dry environments and perfect weather environments. We have people testing in Michigan. There's testing going on in other cold weather environments. There's also testing that is kind of pulling the public into the vehicle and trying to get the buy-in from customers and trying to pilot these different ideas for the different use cases. And so we're seeing a lot of different activities going on to try to move the needle forward, because there's a lot of things that need to be addressed to keep this going forward. With the EPallette's a really cool concept that we came out with a couple of years ago, and it was unveiled at CES. And the idea is it's a modular vehicle. So it's a shuttle. It could be like a shuttle bus. So it's almost like a box on wheels. And it could be a passenger vehicle. It could be served as a shuttle. It could be like you said, a store on wheels. It could be a medical facility or anything you can think of. The idea is it could bring services to you versus you having to go to the services. So mobile stores, mobile services, package delivery, so food delivery. And like I said, it's modular, and the idea is you could shift it. The concept is you could, maybe in the morning time it wants to be a delivery vehicle, in the afternoon it needs to be a shuttle. So that was the idea, and thinking, trying to really push the idea of mobility and mobility for all. And I think what could be really, as I was thinking about this, I feel like the rural and suburban areas often get left out of the discussion here. We always thinking about the moving people in the cities and how autonomous vehicles are going to be moving in the cities and rideshare and all that stuff. I think there's a lot of advantages that could be that could come for those that are in the rural areas where taxi cabs are not very common. Public transportation is not great. You can't really get everywhere that easily out there. And having something like EPalette, where maybe when the demand is there, it can be a public transportation system. It could be a cab. And then in the afternoon, it can move to a pizza delivery vehicle or something. And so having that modular idea, I think, could be really ideal in several domains and several regions, but also in the rural and suburban areas where some of these amenities we have in the cities is not as common there.
Yeah, Bill, Jade sort of touched on a really interesting point, which is that sort of flexibility in a vehicle design allows you to do more things with it, which allows you to utilize it more. And as you know, coming from the fleet world, like that's the holy grail, is to utilize something as much as possible. Talk about what AVs enable in terms of using fleets more efficiently, and then maybe, are you seeing sort of examples of sort of fleets that maybe used to be very, very specific, sort of now, at least potentially being able to serve different markets, or there's still going to be a lot of specialization?
Yeah, I'll first build off something Jade said, and it's the EPalette is a very cool concept, and we have a vehicle in commercial transportation for long haul, a tractor trailer it's a very flexible tool actually, and it's pretty amazing. I never thought about how many ways that type of vehicle gets used currently just in standard use. But that tractor is designed to hook up to essentially any trailer that's out there. And there are tens of millions of trailers in the US alone with registered license plates. So to think of the functionality of to be able to do short haul, local deliveries, but maybe it's more of a bulk type situation with a tractor trailer, or to do long haul across country with essentially the same vehicle. I think, and the EPalette, to think of it as something that might be great in different scenarios, and just kind of filling out a list of use cases and having vehicles to match those things. But yeah, I think back to your question as well on just logistics and the way fleets move. There are many types of fleets. So when I just think of our customers, which is basically a microcosm of the entire industry, you've got fleets that are a private fleet is the term, and that means, you know, a product company is delivering their own goods, whether it's to their stores or to their dealerships or whatever the case is. Then you have transportation fleets that their whole business is moving freight. So they may move for a grocery chain, a health food stores, up through anything and all, just moving parts into auto factories or just any type of freight, and they bid on those jobs and they get those jobs. So that's their business, as opposed to it's just part of the business to move products around. So, you know, and with e-commerce, I think you've just seen a lot. That's been a big impact as far as how companies, traditional large companies like FedEx and UPS, have to think about how they're doing things and how they utilize vehicles and how they get their hands on enough vehicles at certain times. We always thought of, you know, the Christmas holiday is a big time between Thanksgiving and New Year's, basically, for a big uptick in the need for lighter duty vehicles to deliver packages. So, but now in times like this, you're seeing a lot of e-commerce as well for other reasons. But the need to have that flexibility built into supply chains and access to different types of vehicles kind of on demand is an important piece of moving the whole commercial transportation side forward.
Yeah. And Jamie, so Jade mentioned sort of rural applications, and she's absolutely right. That is something that we haven't heard a lot of, and it seems like, as you were saying, sort of we're hearing sort of more and more diversity all the time in terms of the different applications for this. And of course, you know, the new things are going to be at CES first. And I'm wondering, do you see more of a focus on rural applications? Is there anything in specific there, or is that still kind of an emerging thing?
I think there's definitely a focus on making sure that we don't leave out certain areas of the country or segments of the population. It's really important that, you know, this is something that is available to everybody. And I think because a lot of our members and a lot of companies in the space are thinking about different applications, it creates kind of more, I think creates more opportunity, you know, as Jade was saying, with EPalette and being able to transition a vehicle for different uses based on what the demand is. I think you'll start to see more of an increase of use in more rural areas, things that could maybe, you know, partnering with hospitals or medical centers to help provide seniors or those that need transportation with a way to get to appointments. I think there's definitely a lot of applications for linking and expanding the reach of public transportation. So, you know, a last mile solution of helping people that are maybe just a little too far out to utilize that to help provide that extra link. So the applications are there. I think, you know, as the technology continues to develop and you're able to build, you know, systems more towards that, there's definitely a huge opportunity there.
Yeah. And Jade, do you think the sort of the line, you know, especially in the United States, the line between private car transportation and public transportation is very clear cut line. Will autonomous drive technology sort of start to blur that? And maybe how?
So how I see and how we as Toyota see kind of this playing out is we want to keep all of the options on the table. So there's different people that we have to work with, and different people we have to accommodate to, and everyone's needs are different. We're not all the same people. We're not all going to be doing the same things or have the same needs or preferences too. For me personally, I'd like a personally owned vehicle, autonomous vehicle. I don't want to completely get rid of. I like driving, and so I actually would prefer having like a dual mode vehicle where when I'm driving in traffic, I can put it in automated mode. When I feel like driving, because I like driving, I can drive it. And I like the idea of having a personal vehicle where I can leave some of my things in the vehicle. Like if, for people, I always wonder how people who have kids and babies, like, do you constantly carry the child seat in and out of Uber or something? So, things like that, I think having just for personal convenience, having a personal AV would be nice. I think this is going to be, AVs are going to be another disruptor, just like ride sharing services have been. So we'll likely see a shift in how people move and think about moving around. So I think it will blur the lines a little more. But I, especially early on when I got into this space, talking to people who were very unfamiliar with this, it almost to them seemed like it was going to be a flip of a switch, and one day it was all going to be autonomous vehicles. We were going to be taking your vehicle away from you, and I think it needs to be very clearly said that's not going to be the case. It's going to be a gradual progression, and we would like to meet the needs of everybody. And so you've seen from our concept vehicles and our ideas of how we see an automated future, it involves different types of vehicles. At one CES several years ago, we had a concept vehicle that was a personally owned vehicle and had an artificial intelligence agent in the vehicle, and it was able to do that dual mode exchange where, when the driver got tired, it was able to take over the driving task, and when the driver was up, back, and ready to go, he's ready to go. And then the following year, we had EPalette. It was fully autonomous. There's no steering wheel. There's no driver at all. So we're exploring all of the different possibilities because we think that it could be a viable solution for different people.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of what's so fundamentally fascinating about this whole topic, autonomous vehicles, is that everyone's still figuring out what are all these impacts and niches and opportunities and applications and form factors and you name it. And that's what makes conversations like this so fascinating. Bill, before we go, we're running a little low on time here, but we had a question from the audience about sort of how the COVID-19 pandemic might potentially affect autonomous vehicle, its impact. Obviously, we're watching things about the world change, and there's uncertainty about whether that's short-term or long-term. And this is a tough question, but I just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, COVID transfers from person to person. So if you start taking people out of a mix when it's a lot of people touching the same vehicle, for instance, we think about maintenance, rental. So we get a rental vehicle returned. We have to make sure it's sanitized before it goes back out. We have technicians, and our service departments are hubs of activity with vendors coming in and drivers coming in with trucks and the technicians working with each other. So I think everyone's got to think about their domain, and they've got to think about where can not just efficiencies be driven, but health and safety and all that. So if you can have a truck that can get from A to B on its own, and it's got zero chance of anyone touching the inside of that truck, and even if a human then takes over that truck, at least the truck is still sanitized from before. So I can see and the need for just more efficiency of long hauls of getting toilet paper across the country or whatever the case might be. Just the ability to drive straight for 24 hours as opposed to mandatory rest breaks and things that drivers have to undergo. So definitely something there, just not exactly sure where it falls.
Jamie, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think that COVID-19 has really highlighted the adaptability and the innovation of this industry. Several of our member companies have been able to shift some of either their test vehicles or their current fleets to use them for medical supply delivery or delivering tests, partnering in Florida with the Mayo Clinic, or partnering with homeless shelters in San Francisco, or partnering with food banks to deliver food in a sanitary way. I think this is just, just the tip of the iceberg of what we're able to do. And this, has given us that opportunity to see how quickly the industry can pivot and meet different needs and, change depending on differing situations and adapting situations.
And Jade, from sort of Toyota's perspective, do you think is it still too early to say if this is something that's going to be affecting sort of product planning and things like that, 10, 20 years out?
It definitely, brings in some new perspectives that probably weren't forefront before. So I think it's, something that a good thing to kind of keep in mind on how this could be even more advantageous for society going into the future. And I think what's really great of autonomous technology, especially once it is at the point where it is a little more common and it's out there, everybody's comfortable with it, is because it is a software, use cases, and even with like the EPalette, if we have vehicle designs like that at the time, you can kind of shift really quickly for the needs of what's going on around your environment.
Absolutely. Well, we are out of time. Bill Combs, JB Boone, Jade Hill, thank you all so much for taking the time to share your expertise with us and with the viewers. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.